All right. And we were just talking about our holiday, and you went to St. Louis to the City Museum, and I started looking that up, and I'm like, this is so cool.
It was ridiculous. It can't be described. You just have to look it up. If there's anyone from St. Louis listening right now, even on the recording later on, thank you for creating that City Museum, because my son had a blast, and he's ruined forever, actually, for all programs. So thank you, St. Louis. Great city. I love it.
Awesome. Well, hey, I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time, so let's just hand it over, and you can start telling us about donor surveys.
Sweet. Cool. Thanks, Randy, and thanks Nonprofit Hub for making all this happen, and thanks to you for listening in Monday after a holiday, at least for the States. And if you're Canadian, I guess if you're Canadian, you had Canada Day recently, so happy Canada Day. But either way, thanks for spending an hour or so with us. A little bit about me. I work over at Boomerang. We are a provider of donor management software, so you can check that out if you want to. Not we're going to talk about Boomerang today. But basically, my job here is to do things like this. I do webinars and data studies and surveys and a lot of research, and I love it. It's a fun job. Come from a fundraising family. My wife's a career fundraiser. Even our kids, we're trying to raise the next generation of fundraisers. So rest assured, we're trying to keep that going for all of you. That's mostly to just butter you up with the presentation. So surveys. We're here to talk about donor surveys. A little bit of a hot topic these days, which I'm happy about. I love donor surveys. I think they are kind of a secret weapon that maybe you can add to your toolkit that's powerful, that'll give you some results. And it doesn't really take a lot of work to make happen either. That's always a good thing for us busy fundraisers. I know it's like there's just another thing. There's always something that we're not doing. I don't want to make you feel bad if you're not doing surveys yet. I really want to inspire you to maybe try it, experiment with it. And I think you'll see after the presentation that it's something that you can kind of dip your toes into the water without a lot of time or effort and get some cool results. But why we wanted to just why surveys? Well, if you are someone who maybe travels or buys things online, or is really any kind of consumer, which all of you are, you probably have gotten a survey from a for-profit company. I travel a lot for work, I do a lot of conference speaking, and it seems like anytime I rent a car, stay at a hotel, fly in an airplane, I get these surveys just making sure, that everything was okay. Actually, I had kind of a bad experience at a hotel recently. I can't wait for that survey to hit my inbox. I know it's going to hit a couple days from now because I want to tell them how I feel. For-profits do this a lot. It seems like they inundate with us. It might even be a little bit annoying. I went to CVS and I got asked for a survey. I went and got a chicken sandwich and got asked for a survey. Maybe people are a little over the top, but these for-profits know that there is a lot of value in asking their customers how their experience was, because it gives them a couple of things. If they do get answers back, it can be really actionable, right? If someone tells you that they had a great time, 5-star experience, that's someone that may be a loyal customer down the road, or probably is a current loyal customer. And conversely, if you're getting maybe low marks from these businesses, it can help them maybe hone their efforts or make some changes that may benefit future customers and maybe prevent those issues from happening. It's ubiquitous in the for-profit sector, and I think it's ubiquitous for good reason, even though maybe it is sometimes a little bit annoying. I think these businesses realize that if they annoy one person, but they get some really great information from maybe a dozen other people, it's worth it. So my question is, why aren't more nonprofits doing this? If customer retention is so important, is there a parallel to donor retention in the case of using surveys to kind of take the temperature of our donors and see, do they like what we are sending them? Are they satisfied with the communications that we are sending them? The experience of donating, the experience of just being a donor in general. How were our events? How was it volunteering? Did you have a good time? Is there anything that we could have maybe improved upon? These seem like really powerful questions that we should be asking our constituents, since it is such a personal, relationship-based activity that we do, fundraising. And I think if you care about donor retention, you've got to add surveys into your communication mix. So I want to make that case for you right up here at the front. First, for donor retention, why you should care about donor retention. And I know if you've heard me speak on Nonprofit Hub webinars before, or maybe heard me speak elsewhere, I always kind of harp on the retention thing, but it's so important. There's a lot of research into donor retention, and for good reason. The Fundraising Effectiveness Project, I think, is the premier sort of donor retention research study out there. And I've got brand new data for you. This data is literally only a couple of weeks old. We're recording this a little after the 4th of July in 2019. And this is the most recent 2019 data. You can see our average donor retention rate, not very good, 43.5%-ish. It's kind of actually on the down slope over the last few years. We were closer to 50%, but now we're around 43%. This is not a good rate. This means that over half of our donors are not coming back to our organization after making a gift in the previous year. And for first-time donors, it's even lower, 20%. 8 out of 10 first-time donors never make a second gift. Imagine knowing what it is that is causing those donors to not give again. It's really powerful to have that information, because you can maybe recover and maybe recover that relationship before it goes away, and maybe even make some changes before it happens to another donor later on. And you can see here, if you can get a second gift, if you can get repeat donations, if you can get monthly donations from these donors, those retention rates go really high, into the 90% in some cases for monthly donors. So you want to keep these donors, because at those rates, your database really kind of evaporates pretty quickly. At a 40% retention rate with a 60% attrition rate, a pool of 1,000 donors basically is reduced to almost nothing, to only 10 donors after 5 years. So every 5 years, we're basically starting over from scratch at about a 40% retention rate, which is about average of how we're doing. And just a small change in retention can mean a lot of extra money in terms of donor revenue, fundraising revenue from those retained donors. This is a quick illustration of a nonprofit with a 41% retention rate versus a nonprofit with a 51% retention rate. And you can see the organization that has just a 10% higher rate, they're reaping almost $500,000 more from those retained donors. So just a small change in retention can mean a lot of extra revenue for our organization. And sometimes, boomerang customers or people that I talk to maybe on Twitter, or they'll email me and say, hey, our retention rate went from 47% to 48%. And I know what a big difference that can mean in terms of dollars raised. So just that small incremental change in retention can be so powerful and impactful. And I want to kind of make the case for how surveys can help you do that. It's not a magic bullet. It's not the only thing you can do for retention. It shouldn't be the only thing you should do for retention, but it can be something that maybe can get you an extra couple percentage points in terms of your retention rate. We'll talk about that, and I'll show you some examples of organizations who are doing it. And if you want things like planned gifts, major gifts, bequests, you've got to have these people giving to your organization over a long period of time. It's great to have, a second gift and a third gift, but if you can get 5 or more years of regular giving, especially if those people are making monthly gifts or multiple gifts within a year, those people are the best prospects for things like planned gifts, specifically bequests. This is research from the late, great Jerry Panis, mentor of mine before he passed away. And he found that those long-term loyals, those people that have been giving for 5 years or more, absolutely the best prospects. You're not going to get a major gift from a complete stranger. I mean, I guess it could happen, but it's not something you should certainly plan on. But if you can look in your database and find, hey, these are the people that have been giving a long time, those are really the best prospects for those larger gifts. But if you run that report now and you see, oh, gee, we've only got 10 or 20 people who fit into that category, you may struggle with these sort of larger or legacy giving vehicles, which can really be transformative for organizations. So hopefully now you kind of care a little bit about retention, maybe more than you did about 5 minutes ago. I know I kind of zoomed through making that case quickly there, but retention is so important for so many things like sustainability and fundraising effectiveness, and it should be top of mind for everyone, including the board. I think the board should be digging into retention rates as well. So now the question is, okay, how do we do that? How do we keep those people for 5 or more years? What are nonprofits who have those types of donors in spades? What are they doing well to kind of make that happen? And we have research on this. We have research from the Donor Voice. It's a little bit of an older study. It's from back in 2011, but I think it still touches on the current donor psychology. Donor psychology really hasn't changed very much in the last 200 years. If you look at any kind of donor loyalty or donor retention study, Penelope Burke, Adrian Sargent, basically all say the same things, even though they may be decades apart in some cases. Donors really give for basically the same reasons year to year. I like this study because it makes a case for lots of different things you can do for retention, which you should pay attention to, but specifically how surveys can fit into that mix. So this study, pretty cool. It was a cohort of about 250 nonprofit organizations who had a lot of long-term loyal donors. They kind of looked at their data and said, wow, these 250 nonprofits have over 1,200 super loyal donors, kind of the cream of the crop donors. They've been giving to the charities for several years in a row. They've been making multiple gifts within a year. There were some other signals like stock credits and monthly giving. And Donor Voice wanted to know, why do you keep giving to these organizations? Why have you stayed loyal? What have they done well to keep you in the fold? Maybe accidentally, maybe purposefully. That's okay either way. And they gave those loyal donors a list of 32 reasons why they may keep giving to a nonprofit, and they kind of asked them to choose the ones that sort of resonated the most with their current situation. And I want to share with you the top 6 reasons that were given because they're really powerful. You can print out this slide, paste it all over your office. This is kind of your North Star for donor retention. But you'll see here that they really do speak to surveys specifically in kind of a compelling way. So number one reason, I won't surprise you, and again, we see this in other research studies of the same ilk, but donors stay loyal because they think that you're doing what you say you're going to do, right? They think that you're effective. They think that you're a productive organization. If you're a YMCA, you have a gym and a pool, and you have kids come in and they can hang out, and you're getting good outcomes from those programs, right? If you're an animal shelter, you're getting animals adopted and you're having good outcomes, and you're communicating that to the donor. That is really the best thing you can do. It's not enough to just be effective. I think all of you listening, I'm sure, are effective organizations, but the donor has to feel that. They have to perceive that. You have to communicate that back to the donor in forms of storytelling and impact reporting and outcomes reporting, all that good stuff. The kinds of stories that sometimes we hide in our annual report, but should be communicated year long. But that's a whole other presentation. I want to get to the good stuff here. Number two is kind of interesting and also speaks to surveys in kind of a roundabout way. But donors don't want to be kind of caught off guard by anything that you send them. They don't want to feel like they're receiving something from you that wasn't expected or doesn't really kind of make sense for the kind of donor they are. So always telling the donor kind of what comes next in that communication sequence or that communications cadence. If you send someone a thank you email after they give online to your organization, that email should say, hey, be on the lookout for a letter from us, or be on the lookout for the tax information since we haven't sent that yet. Be on the lookout for our newsletter, and maybe the newsletter could say, hey, be on the lookout for an event invitation coming up here, or our special spring or fall appeal. Always kind of telling the donor what comes next in that sequence. And also not sending the donor things that don't really make sense for them. And that kind of requires you to know a little bit about the donor, to know that they care about maybe one program or service offering versus maybe other service offerings that you have at your organization that maybe don't apply as much to that donor. So if you are building that relationship, asking the donors questions about, hey, what are you interested in? Are you interested in ocean life? Are you interested in maybe rainforest life? If you're an environmental organization, making sure you understand what it is they are passionate about so you can deliver content to them that is speaking to those passions. And I'll show you some examples of how you can make that happen in the form of surveys. Number 3, kind of a no-brainer also, donors like to be thanked, of course. It's the number 3 reason, but not just getting a thank you, but getting a fast thank you, a timely thank you, quick. I kind of use those words interchangeably. But donors don't like to kind of sit and wait for gift acknowledgments. They don't want to get a gift acknowledgement at the end of the year for a gift that maybe they gave in March or in July. the faster you can thank a donor, the higher the retention rates. And I'll show you some other research that backs that up a little later on in the presentation. But number 4, my favorite for surveys, donor receives opportunities to make their views known. Donors like it when you ask them questions about their philanthropy, about their experience with your nonprofit, about their experience volunteering or attending an event. It's not like the for-profit side where, you go to CVS and you pick up your prescription and they just ask you kind of a generic question about how your visit was. This is different. This is a donor that is giving their hard-earned money to you, not necessarily receiving services back. I know some nonprofits do that, maybe like a public radio station or something like that, but for most of us, there is no direct transaction. They're simply giving because they believe in you. So I think that there is a higher resonance in that feedback mechanism than there would be on the for-profit side. And we see this in this research study. This is the number 4 reason why these donors have hung around. It's because the nonprofit reaches out to them and asks them, hey, how do you feel? How would you rate the things we're sending to you? Are we hitting the right buttons with our communications? Do you enjoy volunteering? How do you feel about our cause? All those questions are so, so powerful. Not only can you put the answers into practice, and you're not going to get 100% response rate on these surveys. You're not going to get an answer from every single person you survey. But just the act of being asked for their opinion or their views makes them feel good. Even if they do not answer you, it's okay if they don't answer you. They're still going to appreciate. By and large, there's going to be some people, of course, there's someone who's always annoyed with whatever you send, but most of these folks are really going to appreciate that opportunity to provide feedback and maybe even talk to you about what makes them tick as a donor. And we're going to look at lots of examples of those. Then the last 2, kind of similar to number 1 and 3, honestly. They feel like they're part of an important cause, so that I think that speaks to your effectiveness and the fact that you're communicating those outcomes to them. And then appreciation, very similar to number 3. So, kind of the secret sauce of donor retention, there's not too much there. And I'm not saying these are easy things to do, but I do think they are simple things to do. Communicating program impact, donation impact, thanking donors, thanking them quickly, making sure what you're sending to them makes sense. So maybe communication segmenting, and then surveying, providing opportunities for that feedback so that you can make even greater improvements to those communications that you're sending there. So that's why I love surveying in terms of donor retention. I think it's really kind of a cornerstone along with thanking, reporting, and that kind of communication segmenting piece there. So if hopefully you're still with me and you kind of agree, I want to kind of jump into how you can do this, who you should survey, what questions you should ask, and then I'm going to show you some examples of nonprofits who are doing this and getting some cool dividends from their efforts. So who should you survey? Well, honestly, there isn't anyone that is a bad fit for surveying, but I think there are definitely some low-hanging fruit. I love surveying new donors right off the bat. So we saw earlier that the retention rates there are low, 20%. I think it's because someone makes that first gift, by and large, and they're a stranger to us. We don't really know why it is they donated. We may know the channel through which they gave. Maybe if they gave through an event or online or Giving Tuesday, we certainly know their contact information and gift amount. But we don't necessarily know what makes them tick. Why are they passionate about the homelessness situation in the city? Why are they passionate about eradicating Alzheimer's from the world? Why are they passionate about saving, this specific species of wildlife in this area? And we don't ask donors that. I think we fail to show curiosity towards our donors, especially new donors. They are, by and large, like I said, strangers to us. I think they are ideal people to ask, hey, Stephen, thanks for making your donation. I noticed it was your first donation to us. What prompted that donation today? Why are you passionate about the work we do? We'd love to learn more about you. So that kind of information at the beginning of what makes that donor tick, really, really powerful. And then after they have been giving for maybe they've made a second gift, or maybe they started a monthly donation, they've been in the fold, they've been receiving communications from us for a little bit of time at least. we can ask those existing donors, hey, how would you rate the information that we are sending you? Are we telling you the right stories? Are we thanking you well enough? Are we thanking you fast enough? How did you enjoy that newsletter that we sent you? You can kind of audit the things that you've been doing in addition to getting to know that donor at a personal level. And then I think lapsed donors are also an interesting constituency. You can ask those folks, hey, we miss you. We noticed you haven't donated in a while. And I'm not a great copywriter, just so you know. You may not want to use these sentences verbatim, but, we miss you. Did we do something wrong? We'd love to have you back. Is there something that maybe we did that was off-putting? Is there something going on in your financial life that maybe you can't make that same level of commitment? There's lots of different questions you can ask different types of donors. What I don't want you to do is kind of how we treat our donors in terms of appeals and acknowledgments, which is we're sending the same thing to the entire list. As powerful as segmenting is on the fundraising and gift acknowledgement side, it can be equally powerful on the surveying side, because these people are very different types of constituents. An event attendee, you can ask them how the event was. I think actually we do a pretty good job on the event and volunteer side. Did you enjoy volunteering? Was there anything we could have done to make that experience better? Do you think you'll volunteer again? Those are really great questions. I think the key here is, again, that segmentation, making sure that you're choosing contextual questions for each of these different types of constituencies, because they are very different after all. So lots of things that you can ask. I'm going to give you probably 20 or 30 questions by the time all said and done. Don't ask a ton of questions all at once. I think maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 questions at a max per survey is kind of that sweet spot. But there's lots of different things. You can audit your efforts in terms of communications. You can ask the donor how connected they feel to you as an organization or to the cause, why it is they care about that cause, especially on the new donor side. So powerful in getting to that motivation early on in the relationship. And then why did you stop giving on the lapsed donor side? And I don't know that you would necessarily word it just like that. It seems a little aggressive. But I'll show you some examples of a lapsed donor survey that kind of take a nice tact in terms of broaching that question. But there's tons of things, and I think it comes down to curiosity. And again, not only will you get some useful information back from the donor, at probably about a 10 to 15% rate, you're not going to get 100% response rate. I promise you. Don't get discouraged if it's only 5 to 15%. That's okay. Because don't forget, those people who receive the survey, I think it will make them feel good, just the fact that you're asking them. Even if they don't respond, or maybe they put it off because they can't respond right then and there, and then they forget, that's okay. Still asking those questions can have a powerful impact, even if you don't get an answer. So I'll get to some examples here real quick. Charity Water, they do a really good job of this. I'm a monthly donor to them. I have been for years, and I routinely get surveys from them. Not only do I get these great emails that kind of show me the impact of my gift, but they are frequently, not too frequently, I would say, but frequently asking me questions. And this is one that really stood out for me. It was kind of the bottom of this newsletter that was just kind of an impact story. But the bottom, we want to hear from you. Help us improve our supporters' reporting experience by taking this 3-question survey. So I like how they kind of frame it. It's a simple question. It's a short question. It's not very intrusive, I don't think. It's on an email, so it's just a quick electronic link that you can click there and fill out this survey. But they kind of make it donor-centered, right? We want to hear from you. We want to improve your experience. Not, hey, we want to find out if we are doing a good job. No, we want to improve your experience. So you see that kind of subtle flip in terms of who is actually being referenced in the request there. And then you click that link and you get a really simple 3-question survey. How would you rate experiencing this email update, from kind of very satisfied to very dissatisfied? So simple 5-question range. And then a nice write-in piece, what was your favorite or least favorite parts? I love the free form question because you're going to get a lot of varied responses that you can't really predict necessarily every type of response in like a drop-down menu or a bubble selector like you see there. And then 3, the net promoter question. This kind of question is usually referred to as a net promoter. You saw a lot of the surveys that I showed on the front end of this presentation from the for-profit examples. Those were mostly net promoter surveys. How likely are you to donate again, to buy again, to rent again? Sometimes these are like a 1 to 10 scale or a 1 to 7 scale. This one is a 1 to 5 with some words, very likely to definitely not likely. So I like this question because I think it can kind of head off any retention issues up front. So if you have someone saying, yeah, they're very likely or likely, you might want to move them into a certain segment of communications versus someone who says, not really likely, definitely not likely. You might want to do something with that information. You might want to appeal to them in a different way. You may want to take them at their word and not appeal to them at all. Some donors really do want a one and done experience. That's okay. You just got to be careful with that because some people will self-select out of that, even though they may actually donate again in the future. So I'm not saying necessarily cut them off in communications, but it can give you some interesting information there. Other things that Charity Water does when someone becomes a new donor, this is an email I got from them when I first started the monthly commitment. So the survey I just showed you here was kind of further into the relationship. I've been a donor for a while, but this is the one they sent me right off the bat. And this survey is more about me as a person, whereas this survey is more about how Charity Water is doing communicating. This one, we want to improve your experience. Tell us more about yourself in this quick survey. And this survey asks questions like, why are you passionate about clean water? Why do you care about our cause? What prompted your donation today? What prompted you to start a monthly commitment? So more questions about me as a person, which I think makes a lot of sense because I'm a new donor. They don't really know much about me except for my address and my email address. That's basically all they know about me. They know I live in Indiana, which is not really actionable data. So it makes a lot of sense that they would ask, hey, what makes you tick? Why do you care about clean water? Why are you caring about our cause? And if you get that information, well, I visited Africa and I saw firsthand what it was like and I want to give back, that person may get different communications versus someone who says, oh, I just saw something on Facebook and it seemed like a good cause, so I just kind of gave you, a quick $10 a month. You might want to communicate to that person differently based on what they say. So it can be really powerful in helping you kind of craft your future communications to these donors. So I love the existing donor survey versus the new donor survey and how they kind of ask different questions there. Another example of a new donor survey, a new member survey. So for you membership groups, you can still do this. It's great. It's powerful. If you're a YMCA, I've seen this before. We joined the YMCA here down the street from Bloomerang recently. My family did. We got something kind of similar to this, which I think makes a lot of sense because you don't know these people very well. So figure out what it is that makes them tick so that you can communicate to them in kind. So this is from World Wildlife Fund. Now, this is an organization that has kind of a wide service offering, right? They touch on a lot of things: wildlife, environmental conservancy, different types of environments like the oceans and the forests and the mountains, rainforests. There's a lot of different things they touch on. So I think it makes a lot of sense why they ask this question in the bottom left. Hey, what is your specific conservation interest or concern? So if someone says, I live in Canada, I care about the Canadian wilderness, that's great. Then you can only send them things that speak to the Canadian situation. You don't have to worry about sending them maybe, something about Africa or, Asia or something that maybe they don't necessarily care about. So that, I think, makes a lot of sense if you have a wide service offering. If you don't have a wide service offering, if you are an organization that is trying to get rid of a specific disease, one disease, you may ask them a question like this first question, why did you choose this? Why are you passionate about the Alzheimer's problem or cancer? I know there's lots of different types of cancers, so that's maybe not a good example. but ask them, why did you give? Why are you passionate about this specific cause if you have kind of that focused service offering? Other questions I think are fun. How do you participate in conservation? I go to parks, I go bird watching, I go hiking. Again, this I think is tailored so that they can be sending them very specific types of communications. Then there's some demographic information there. Kind of have to be a little bit careful with that. I think that if you're going to ask it, you should be using it. Don't just ask it because it may put some people off. And then if you never use it, there was no point to putting those people off, right? And also I've seen research that, segmenting by age and gender identity isn't always very helpful. I don't know exactly what they do, but maybe WWF does something with that information. I don't work there, so I can't speak to it. But I think there's a lot of smart people there, so I don't think they just kind of put that there for no reason. And then more contact information just in case they don't have a fleshed out profile for them. They may not. They may have given online and they've not given a ton of information. But I really like this. I think if you're a member organization, you can kind of emulate some things here. Pretty simple. Why'd you choose us? Why are you passionate about the cause? How do you participate in the work we do? And then a little bit more personal information there. Pretty simple, 4 questions. It's not, super time consuming. It can be pen and paper. It doesn't just have to be electronic. I think this is one that was literally mailed out to folks with a BRE that they could send back really easily. So it doesn't have to be digital, but there are some really easy ways to make these digital, putting them in that automated email, putting a link at the bottom of an email you're already sending out. You can automate a lot of this, which is fun. Another kind of sneaky place to ask these questions is following an online gift. When someone makes an online gift, they fill out the form, and then they get to that kind of thank you page or that confirmation page. ACLU, they put a quick question there. Hey, why did you choose to make a donation today? And I think this is a great question to ask. It's generic enough that you can ask that question to any type of donor, regardless of whether they're a first-time donor or they've been given to you for 50 years. What prompted you to give today? Did you see something that made you ticked off and you wanted to do something about it, so you came online? Did you see an ad? What happened to kind of prompt that gift today? This is an easy place to ask that question because it's right after the gift is made, and you can capture some interesting information right then and there. So that's maybe another sneaky good place you can put that question, that confirmation page or that thank you page. Last, donors. This is from the Agents of Good. If you want to read the full letter, it's this beautiful 3-page letter. It's from Ontario Nature. If you Google Ontario Nature last letter from Agents of Good, you can read the whole thing. But after this nice letter that kind of speaks to the impact that the donor has made over the years, there's a simple 2-question survey, which I think is very, very tactful and a really nice way to kind of broach the subject with lapsed donors. Hey, what needs to happen for you to renew your support for us? I will renew my support if and when this happens, and they can kind of write in their answer. And then what matters to you? This is your space to tell us what you think and feel about us and our relationship. We promise to listen to you and follow up with you if you wish. Maybe there was something that was sent to them that kind of rubbed the donor the wrong way, and they didn't really have a mechanism to provide that feedback. I know it seems like it's so easy to go to like Yelp or Facebook if maybe a restaurant kicks us off or something like that. I think it's a little bit harder with a nonprofit. So giving them the opportunity, hey, you sent me something and, you misspelled my name, or maybe you referenced my partner who actually passed away. And you didn't know that, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. You may get some of those answers back if you ask the questions in this kind of nice way. Maybe it was simply, oh, geez, I didn't even realize we had stopped supporting. I'd love to renew right now. No problem. Or maybe it was, hey, my spouse lost his job, and finances were a little tight. That's all. I still love you guys. So there's lots of different kinds of answers you can get back. But I think kind of approaching them very respectfully, very, very tactfully. And again, donor-centric. This is all about them as a donor, what matters to you, what needs to change in order for that support to be renewed. So that's one way you can approach the lapsed donor side. I would check out the rest of that letter. If you can't find it, just send me an email or a tweet. I'll send it to you. I know right where to get it. Other uses of surveys. This is a really cool survey from the Donor Voice that they recommend you send out on an annual basis, I believe it is. And they give it all away for free. There's a blog post here on the slides. When you get them, you can read more about it. But this survey is designed to kind of bubble up to the surface your long-term loyals, the people who really like you, but maybe fly under the radar because they don't send you signals like large gift amounts, or maybe they're not yet monthly donors, but people who really, really like you. And conversely, people who are not super passionate about you and that maybe you cannot worry as much about, or maybe you do want to fight for them. Maybe you want to fight for those strongly disagreed, people who give you a 0, 1, 2, or a 3 on certain questions. But Donor Voice is adamant that you do not change the questions or the rating scale. They have tested this with a lot of their clients, and they have kind of landed on this as the best way to send this survey. All you need to do is change out the organization name. Just put your organization name in there and place of Audubon. But the 3 questions are: I'm a committed donor, I feel a sense of loyalty, and this organization is my favorite charity. And they found that of the people who give 8, 9, and 10 on those questions, those 3 questions specifically, they were able to predict increases in revenue from them over the next 1.5 to 2 years. So it can be kind of a leading indicator of people that maybe they may upgrade on their own, maybe ripe for upgrade requests, maybe people who are going to give you an extra gift. But I think the main takeaway here is this is how you can identify your most rabid fans, where you can't really see that when you're just looking at gift amounts and gift frequencies. Gift frequencies, I think, are more useful than gift amounts, to be sure, but it doesn't quite give you the full picture. So you don't have to worry about who are the people who really like us versus the people who are just kind of, passive supporters. You can ask them. You can do it. You don't have to wonder. They will give you that information if you ask for it. So that may be a survey you might want to try. That's one that's locked and loaded. Just change the organization name, and you can send that out this week, maybe even today if you're feeling aggressive. So that may be one you might want to try to kind of get started. Other templates here. This is from my buddy Pamela Grow. This is kind of another example of a lapsed donor letter. Again, I think the key here is leading with gratitude, speaking about the impact of their previous giving, being donor-centric, not just kind of hitting them up for money or making them feel like, a deadbeat or anything like that. Leading with gratitude, you've been a supporter, but hey, we could notice that, you haven't given in the last couple of years, and we feel bad about that, and we'd love to know what's going on. So would you fill out this enclosed short survey? So that's when you can search for. If you want to maybe repurpose that for your own efforts, just search for Pamela Grove's sample donor survey letter. You'll find that there. You can get some tidbits there. So now you kind of know what surveys look like, maybe how you kind of approach them. But where should you kind of put them in with your communication mix, right? You're probably already sending out a ton of stuff. You're sending out newsletters and appeals and maybe stewardship pieces, or certainly sending out thank yous. Where do surveys kind of fit in to that plan? Well, I think the first thing is you should have a documented communication plan, specifically for different types of donors. If you do this for no one else other than new donors, first-time donors, I think that can be really powerful, because this is the first things they're ever receiving from you as a nonprofit. You want to really stick that landing. So document it. When are you going to thank the donor? How quickly you're going to thank them? Who is going to be thanking them? Is it a board member? Is it a staff member? And then when does that survey kind of fit into place there? This is from Lori Jacobwith, another buddy of mine. You can download this right from our website and just kind of delete those little cells and write in whatever makes sense for you. But you can see she recommended a survey within 6 weeks of that first donation. I think you can test this and maybe move some things around. Maybe you want to move that survey further up into maybe the first week or the first month rather than waiting into the second month. But the most important thing is write it down and know when it is they're going to get the survey from you, and be consistent for a while so that you can measure the efforts and say, hey, we've been doing a survey 6 weeks after the gift. We've been doing that for about a year. We aren't getting a ton of responses. Maybe we should move that survey up into the first month or maybe even the first week and see if we get more responses. And having that written plan will allow you to move those columns around and test things. But I think it's critical that they get that survey pretty quickly within that relationship unfolding, that first-time donor. Now, I would say 6 weeks is pretty quick for sure. But I think you could maybe even experiment with a faster survey there. Another example of this is a plan from Pamela Gross. Same thing, new donor, first 12 months. When are they going to get that survey? So theirs is kind of a how are we doing survey there between the 8th and the 9th month. But she also recommends a getting to know your new donor survey maybe in that first or second week. So there's a little bit more aggressive than Lori's there. But there's no right or wrong answer. Have it written down. This is maybe a nice exercise you could do over a lunch period with your fundraising staff perhaps, and say, okay, what are we going to spend in that first 12 months of that new donor relationship? And when are they going to get a survey, if at all? Hopefully they will get a survey. The first-time donor survey, I think, is one you should all implement, because you show some curiosity. Like I said, you don't know that person. You may not know why it is that they give, and you can get some powerful information there. If you automate your surveys, you got to be careful, because you don't want to ask a question to a donor that they might feel like you should already know the answer to. So, you got to be careful of not asking a long-term loyal donor why it is they're passionate about your cause, because they may say, well, what do you mean? You should know me, right? You know I've been giving for 20 years because my grandmother died of Alzheimer's. Like, I'm so offended you even asked me that. What's wrong with you? Be very, very, very careful if you automate these things. Even if you're not automating these things, make sure you're asking the right questions to the right people, because you could potentially alienate someone. I think that if you're going to automate, be generic. So a generic question are things like, hey, what prompted you to give today? So that's a question you can ask any kind of donor, regardless of how long they've been giving to you, versus, hey, why are you passionate about Alzheimer's? That's a question you should only be reserving for brand new donors, and be very careful about asking that question to a long-term loyal donor, because you should probably already know the answer to that question. But if you don't know the answer to that question, go for it, right? If you've never had that dialogue, that's okay too. But if you have that dialogue, you could potentially alienate that person. Donor satisfaction, again, how easy was it to donate? So kind of auditing your own efforts, that's a question you can ask everyone. But questions that you cannot ask everyone are things like, why are you passionate about the cause? How well have we been communicating to you over the years? You wouldn't ask that question to a brand new donor because they haven't been receiving anything from you. So just kind of follow that Charity Water example, right? This is a specific one. You're a new donor. You just joined the monthly giving program. We want to know more about you because you're new to us. So that survey is very specific to that new relationship. Versus the ACLEs, where it's a little bit more generic. This could appear to any type of donor because it's just the online gift thank you page. Hey, what prompted your gift to you today? Why do you support us? I might even change that a little bit to make it even more generic. Something like, hey, why did you donate today? Or what prompted your gift today? In the automation side. Other places you can kind of sneak in those surveys. Maybe if you send a follow-up email to event attendees, hey, thanks for coming to our gala. We'd love to improve things for next year. Could you fill out this quick survey? And with events, you're going to get some answers that maybe you don't want to put into place, like, oh, I didn't like the tablecloth colors, or, things like that you may not worry too much about. But things like, hey, it was really cold in the venue. and I was freezing for the whole 2 hours I was there, or, I didn't like that one speaker, thought they were kind of dry. You can put those answers into work for the next year. I think that can be really powerful for you. Same with volunteers. Did you have fun? How would you rate your experience volunteering? Did we do a good job orienting you? I think volunteer orientation is a really powerful thing that sometimes gets missed. Did you prep the donor or the volunteer well enough? Did they kind of know what they were there to do? Did they understand the impact of the work they were doing? Those are great questions. Monthly donors, I think, is another cohort that could get their own survey, perhaps. How would you rate the communications we've been sending you as a monthly donor? Do we send you the right kinds of stories? And different questions like that. So, the more segmentation you do, I think the more powerful the questions become, because they really are tailored to that audience. We've talked a lot about emails and paper surveys, but don't forget that you can ask questions in person. You can be talking to people live and in person and ask them those questions. You can call a donor and ask them those questions. I think that tour invitations are a really good opportunity to do that. This is a welcome kit I got from a nonprofit here in Indy. My first gift, our family's first gift. I love the welcome kit. That's a whole other webinar for sure, but, zero in to the bottom right-hand corner. Every day is a great day to visit, to see your gift at work through a personal visit or a tour. Please contact us to schedule that. And if you get that person on site for a tour, not only can they see all the wonderful things you do, but that's an opportunity to ask them more questions about themselves, why they care about your school or your environment that you're trying to protect, or whatever it is you do. The tour invitation can be a really good opportunity to ask those questions in person. I'm not saying sit that person down for an interview and grill them, but maybe if you're just walking down the hallways or walking down the trail, I think naturally you're going to ask that person some of those small talky type questions. And the small talk questions are powerful. That's all these surveys really have been, is kind of the small talk questions. Same with a phone call. If you make phone calls to thank donors, hopefully you're doing that for at least some of your donors. I think the reason that there is so much research about the power of phone calls is because you're inevitably going to have a conversation if they pick up. If you're leaving a voicemail, you're not going to do that, but voicemails are still good. But if they pick up the phone and you say, hey, Randy, thanks so much for making a donation. Noticed it was your first gift. Just wanted to introduce myself, make sure I could answer any questions that you have. And just kind of wanted to get to know you a little bit more so that we can be sending you, the right kinds of communication. Maybe you want to leave that last part off and not spill the beans too much. But again, in-person phone calls doesn't just have to be electronic or paper. It can be very personal as well. Obvious one, don't send, questions. We talked about this, but don't send questions to people that does not make any sense for the type of donor they are. And I think this kind of requires you to have clean data and have a database that has useful data in it and not crossing those wires too much. But don't ask a long-term loyal donor, why they're passionate about you, unless you legitimately do not know. But I think that may be a little hard to believe if they're really in that cohort of 10 or 20 donors that's been donating to you for a long time. You probably can think of a couple donors that maybe you lean on already for stories or testimonials or things like that. You probably know what makes those people tick. So just be careful in sending surveys. Other question categories, just some other info that you can start to use. My guy, Adrian Sargent, he's the godfather of donor retention. He's the best. He recommends 4 categories of donor questions specifically, and I think all of the examples we've touched on can fall into one of these 4 buckets. But I think if you see these 4 words, I think it'll kind of get your gears turning a little bit more. Satisfaction, trust, commitment, and intimacy. So we've seen a lot of the satisfaction questions already, like, how are we doing communicating to you? Was it easy to donate today? We've kind of seen those. Trust, maybe a little bit more in depth here. How do they feel about you as an organization in terms of maybe your programs and services? Are you doing the things you say you're going to do? Are you really delivering those outcomes? Do you think that they are an organization with a lot of integrity? These are other interesting questions that you might ask. I would probably save these for maybe those more loyal donors, those more long-term donors. Commitment. So how do they feel about the relationship between the donor and the organization? So I really care about the cause, maybe a scale of 0 to 10. We saw these questions in the donor voice survey, that 3-question survey. Is it my favorite charity? Am I committed to the work or the relationship of this organization? And then intimacy, which we really saw in that donor voice survey. I feel closely connected. This is an organization that we were meant for each other. And I feel warm when I think about that organization. Maybe from a 0 to 10 scale, that could be kind of interesting to kind of bubble up those best, most rabid fans. But those 4 categories, especially the satisfaction, I think if you can only do one set of these questions, really I would look at satisfaction, because that's what surveys really boil down to is, did they have a good experience? Treating them the things that they want, for sure. Email, you might want to preamble it with a little email. We can't do this without you. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to us. There's something else that you can give us that's equally important. Your opinion, your real honest opinion. I'm taking this 2-minute survey. It would mean so much to us. So you can email these things out in a quick link. This is a Boomerang screenshot. We have a survey tool built in that makes it pretty easy. We do a 1 to 7 scale, which is like a scientific scale for questions. 0 to 10 is fine as well. I don't think there's a wrong way to maybe craft the scale, but there is a wrong way to craft the questions. You can ask questions that actually can give you really harmful data. So this is not something you want to just jump in and kind of write your own questions necessarily, unless you have a background in surveys. So just be careful, lean on some of the questions that I have shown you in this presentation, because they are things that are used by really large, really successful organizations that have people that are crafting them in kind of a scientifically sound manner. And then when you get the answers, you can kind of see how you're doing. Do we do better in one category or another? Do we have lapsed donors who are giving us more reasons than some of the other reasons? Maybe we have a problem with a specific area that we're doing. Maybe we don't actually have lapsed donors and we think they're lapsed because our data isn't clean, something like that. Maybe we over solicit. That seems to be the number one reason that all the lapsed donors are giving. But it can be really powerful to examine the data you get back and make those changes. It's not enough to just get those answers and say, well, that's kind of interesting, but if you can actually turn around and do something different, adjust your efforts, change something about the communications cadence or how you do it, it can be really powerful and start to show some neat results from your efforts. Other little pieces of tidbits here. If you're thinking, geez, I don't want to annoy people like those hotels and rental car companies annoy me with all those surveys. It seems like you can't even go to the grocery store without getting a survey. But we have a ton of corroborating research that it is different for donors. It's not the same as it is for consumers. DonorCentrics looked at this. They found that donors who complain actually are retained higher than donors who do not complain. So if you can be kind of creating a conduit for those complaints and then resolving the complaints, you're going to create friends for life. You can see that the retention rates here, upwards of 75 to 90%, super high retention rates if you can take care of those issues. And, not kind of keeping it out in the shadows is not a very good excuse. It's kind of like joining, social media. Like, well, if we're on social media, people are going to complain to us. And it's like, well, they're probably already complaining whether or not you're there. But if you're listening, you can do something about it. So if maybe your board resists this, I might show them this slide and say, hey, there's a lot of research out there that shows if we can actually mitigate and maybe even resolve some of these complaints, it will impact donor loyalty, which impacts revenue, and the board's really going to care about that for sure. Lapsed donors, I would look at people that haven't given in a couple years. I wouldn't necessarily worry if it's been 366 days since their last gift. I wouldn't necessarily consider someone lapsed until maybe it gets into the next calendar year, but there's lots of different opinions on that. I mean, you can consider someone lapsed sooner than that, certainly. Send in that last donor survey, maybe a nice letter that thanks them and tells them about all the great things that they've done in the past. And don't forget, maybe they just lost touch, maybe they passed away, maybe they moved. You can also spend some money on data services like an NCOA. Hopefully all of you are doing an NCOA at least once a year, maybe twice a year. All of these things can help on the lapsed donor side, not just surveys. Some sample questions on the lapsed side, this could be maybe like a pick multiple or a drop down where they can kind of select what applies to them. Maybe you weren't thanking them well enough. Maybe they're not really a cause they're passionate about anymore. Lots of different things that you can ask there. But I would draw on these specific questions. I think this is a good starting point for sure. And then don't overload them with a lot of jargon. Keep it donor centric. Keep it about them. We want to improve your experience. We want to serve you better. We want to get to know you. Lots of those you words for sure. And those write-in questions, those free-form fields where they can just type in anything. That's really powerful. Don't lock them into just those drop-down menus with some pre-populated answers. Let them write in themselves what it is that's going there. So that's it from me. I know we're about at noon Eastern, but I'm happy to take questions. I think the key here is segmentation. That's just going to keep your surveys really powerful and really personal. And do something with the information you get. Don't just lock it in a shelf somewhere or in a drawer. Do something with it. If you're going to go through all the trouble, it's not a ton of trouble, but it is a little bit of trouble of making these things happen, do something with the info. And stay donor-centric for sure, and the segmentation, I think, is really key there. So if you liked this presentation, I got lots of other resources on the Boomerang website. You can even check out the Boomerang software if you want to. Just go to our website, click resources, click freebies in the toolbar. You'll see it there. I think we'll get you the slides, but we've also got an ebook version of this presentation, which I think is a little bit better than the slides, honestly. So you can check that out. Go to our website. You'll find it pretty easily in our resources section, or I'll send it to you. We'll send it to you with the slides. We'll get it to you somehow, I promise. So Randy, you want to do a few questions before we wrap things up here? I'm also happy to
certainly
by email and Twitter. I love it.
So Joy is asking, do you survey corporate donors the same way that you would survey individual donors?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really good segment, actually, that I should probably put in these slides, because corporate donors, sponsors, even vendors and like in-kind sponsors for things like events and stuff, they really go underthanked a lot of times. I think that's an awesome segment, and I would absolutely ask them different questions. So thinking off the top of my head, do you get value out of this relationship with us as a nonprofit, right? Are we thanking you? Are we kind of highlighting you well enough as a sponsor or as a corporate donor? Yeah, I think definitely ask those folks very specific questions that probably no one else would get asked for sure. I think that's a great idea for some very segmented questions. I think I would maybe focus on what they are getting out of it, because a corporation, they give to nonprofits for PR purposes, marketing purposes, and if you can kind of audit, and some people give out of the goodness of their heart. I didn't mean to make it sound like they don't do that, but if you can maybe get to the heart of what they're getting out of it, I think that's really going to help the relationship. So yeah, excellent idea.
And one more before we go. For smaller organizations with smaller donor pools, do you think people may view surveys as quote unquote less than a personal email or phone call asking the same question?
I haven't seen any data on that specifically. I think that if you have a smaller donor pool and you can get to them all on the phone, I would try that, honestly. If someone does pick up the phone and you get them in person, you can start that conversation pretty easily. But if you leave them, a simple thank you voicemail, I think you could probably follow that up with maybe an email survey. I think that's okay. But if you have that small gift, frequency or gift amounts that it's not too taxing for you to start personal, I would always start personal with phone calls and those tours if you can get them on site, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for your time today on this fine Monday.
Good way to
always
start
good
the
information.
Second half of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Here we go.
Or a new fiscal year for some folks.
Right. This is the new year. Cool. Well, thanks again so much, and hope to see you again soon. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. The only thing that we ask is, in form of payment, is surprise, surprise, fill out a survey when we're done with it.
Fill out a survey. I love it. So meta.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Yeah.